It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. I am really looking forward to today's guest. Hopefully, we can get her on. She is a divorce coach as well as a co parent. Here she is, co parenting expert. And let me get her on here. Mental health professional. So, we always hear the term, your kids are going to be okay. It worked.
It
Just need
worked.
one healthy parent. And and it's like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, what am I actually supposed to do to be the healthy parent? Because I think even though we hear that, we don't really believe it. I know when I separated from my ex, I thought my kids' lives are ruined and there's nothing I can do about it. And I felt really helpless. And that was my biggest concern, is how are my kids going to be okay? And so, Jill, when you and I met recently, I loved your background, and I thought maybe she can help enlighten others who are earlier in the process and terrified, because I think from my own experience doing this for 11-ish years, like, the kids can be okay. So we have to believe it, but we have to learn how to do it. So, Jill, before you even officially introduce yourself, how common is that question amongst people that you work with as well? Do they have those same fears? Is it just us in the high conflict cases?
Oh no, everybody is scared about the kids. And that's one of the biggest things to worry about when you're going through divorce, right? Because you can make a lot of mistakes. And kids are resilient, but there are ways to protect them.
Yeah. All right. So Jill, tell us who you are and a little bit about your background.
So, I am a licensed therapist. I'm a divorce coach. I'm a certified mediator, and I'm a co-parenting expert. I've been doing parenting since the 90s. So, like, parenting and co-parenting is one of my areas of expertise, and I love talking about it, and I love helping people protect children.
Yeah, and again, I love the assorted backgrounds, how everything led to this, and you know that I can relate. So let's first think about what signs, because we're also worried about it, but what signs should a parent look for in terms of recognizing when a child is really being affected significantly by the stress? Because you know that my partner and I only deal with high conflict cases, so there's tremendous stress, and some kids are fine and some are not. So what should we be looking for with kids?
So, any kind of change in behavior, acting out in school or at home, doing things that they hadn't done in the past, like, not doing their homework or being argumentative or difficult, any kind of behavior that's different. Regressing is another behavior. Sometimes children regress. Um,
Can
if
you
they're
can you give us
teen.
examples of regression? Because I think some people aren't always sure. They think it's peeing in the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the regressions, but it could be that they were always able to, do their homework on their own, and all of a sudden they want you to help them. Or if they, had a skill and suddenly they're not able to focus, if they were, a good writer and all of a sudden, they're struggling writing, so any kind of um change you really have. And it's hard because it may be because of the divorce, but it may be something else too. Maybe they had something happen to them at school or with their friends. And you really do have to be aware and check in with your children and talk to them and listen. A lot of
Mhm.
times parents, are busy talking and we don't listen enough. So it's really important that we ask questions and we listen to them to find out how things are going and how they're doing.
Yeah, and it can be so hard. I know one of the things I do and a lot of our clients do as well is we are experiencing so much with the divorce that we think it's the same that our kid is experiencing, and kind of not being able to separate that the kid is having a different experience. So in terms of that, like from a clinical perspective, what are some of the psychological, like most common psychological impacts on a child who is in the middle of a high conflict divorce situation or custody battle?
So Anxiety and depression are the two big things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that with kids differently. Um, I saw it with my son, who was 12 at the time that we were getting divorced. He was not as happy as he normally was. You know, he still was functioning, he was going to school, he was doing things, but, you know, he lost this kind of happiness that he was
Mm-hmm.
just you know, he was a very happy kid, and he really wasn't. We told them in May until he went back to school in September. By
Mm-hmm.
when he started the new year in September, he was kind of like his old self again. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't severe, but it was noticeable, you know, where you could tell that he just didn't enjoy things as much. There was just something missing, you
I
know,
picture
that
like a
was.
heaviness, like not a lightness.
Yeah, exactly. And so you know, that is normal. You know, kids do go through some depression when they're going through this. And if it extended beyond that time period, I would have gotten him help.
Mm-hmm.
But he was better, you know, in a relatively short amount of time. Anxiety can show in so many ways. You know, all of a sudden they want you to hold their hand, or they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do things by themselves, or they want you to come and lie down with them in bed, you know, where they never wanted, things like that. Or they're scared of, you know, things that they weren't scared of in the past. So, you know, anxiety is more obvious, I think, than depression. And it also can be temporary. You know, both of these things are temporary and normal in the initial few months that they're dealing with this. But if it lasts more than a couple months, I
Mm-hmm.
would get professional help.
Yeah. Um, I was going to say, like, one of the very difficult things to deal with is communicating with an ex, and especially when it's an unhealthy ex. I know for a lot of our people, for all of our people, they tend to feel like I got out of the relationship and I'm so scared that now my kid is still stuck alone with the other parent. So, do you see that as well?
I see that all the time. That's a huge concern. And the truth is that the father or mother, whoever it is that you're separating from, has a very different relationship with the spouse than the child has with them. And I'm not saying they're not impacted by it,
Mhm.
but they're going to be different to the children because they consider the child part of them and they
Mm.
love them unconditionally. It's not the same with a spouse. So they will have some of the same behaviors, but um, the other thing I want to say, so that's the first thing, they're going to treat the child differently than they treated the spouse. The second thing is the child has two places eventually, maybe not initially, but eventually has two places to go.
Mhm.
And my child actually said to my ex at one point, you know, if you don't stop yelling, I'm going to mom's. And that's something you can't do when you're married, right?
Yeah.
So the child actually has more power than a spouse does. And I'm not saying to tell your child to do that because you shouldn't tell your child to do that,
Mhm.
but they do have more options than you know, a spouse, and they're also not at the parent's house all the time. They're only there the percentage that the parent has them. So if it's 50-50, they're only there 50% of the time, which if it was an intact family before, that's half of the time that they were with that other parent. So
Mhm.
it is different for a child when they're going through this. Some children handle it fine. I mean, they really are, they figure out how to have a relationship with a high conflict parent, and they put up boundaries and they're fine. Some children don't, and they need
Mhm.
professional help.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the anxiety, like I said, that our people have where they feel like that influence is going to make such an impact. Um, how do you deal with your own anxiety when you see that your ex is starting to kind of poison the child against you or say negative things about you? I mean, we're already like so stressed out, and it's terrifying.
So there's a few things. If if you have a conversation with your child about this, you could say something like, if either of us say anything bad about the other, please tell us,
Mhm.
because we shouldn't be saying anything bad
Mhm.
about the other parent. We both love you, and we have to support the relationship with you and the other parent. Um, the other thing is that you develop your relationship with your child and try not to worry about the child's relationship with the other parent, because if your relationship is strong, it will outlast anything negative that is said against you. And I mean, I've seen certain cases where it's really bad, the alienation and the negative talk, but most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, it won't completely alienate if you have a strong relationship with that child. There are those few circumstances where no matter what you do, that child is connected to the other parent and you can't do anything about it, but that's rare.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. So having that strong relationship with your child, to me, that's not something you suddenly just do. But what are some ways to start building those very strong bonds to protect a child against being weaponized?
Well, so it's very difficult. I know I had a hard time with this because when they say things like that the other parent said that aren't true, um, the first thing you do is get defensive, right?
Mhm.
And when you get defensive, that kind of shuts off the communication. And so you really have to try not to get defensive and have to get into the child's world and realize that this child is hearing this from a parent who they love. And you want to ask them about it. Like, how are you feeling about this? And do you really think that I would do something like that? Or do you really think that that's something that I would do, so you really want to have help them kind of think it through
Mhm.
instead of just saying that's not true. I can't believe they said that to you. They're lying to you, because that's going to put them on the defensive and shut off the conversation. So you really want to be gentle when you talk about this and be curious about it.
Yeah. So we're getting a comment, which I agree with. If the child is afraid of the abuser, they will do whatever they need to do to keep them happy, including rejecting the healthy parent. I mean, this, is like our whole upcoming book and course about that. So if you are being rejected, I know it's a small percent of it's huge in our world because that's all we deal with, but how do you deal with being rejected from a child that has been close to you?
Yeah, it is one of the most difficult things anybody can go through, right? I mean, this is it's like you're being stabbed. It's so painful I mean, get as much support as you can. Get a therapist, a support group, Lisa, you guys are amazing. And what I would say is that keep trying.
Mhm.
I've done reunification counseling, which is really difficult. And you can get the court to mandate that, but if the child's not willing to do anything, it may not work. But try it. Try reunification counseling. Keep reaching out to them in very kind ways, send them cards, send them texts, not too much because you don't want to be getting them upset, but
Mhm.
you want them to know that you still care and that you are open to them anytime they're ready to talk to you and be with you.
Yeah, yeah.
What about
Is it,
teens?
yeah, yeah. What about teens?
Teens are hard because they don't like to be with parents no matter, if it's an intact family, they're angry at parents. They've got so much going on. So, I did have a tough time with my youngest child during his teens because of things that were told to him that weren't true.
Mm,
He never cut off from me, which was okay, which was great. But I have a great relationship with him now. So what I would say is be patient with teens because it could be just they're taking out their anger out on you,
mm.
and at some point in the future, they won't be that way.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you know the answer to this one because this is going down the alienation path, of course, is what if you're blocked?
Blocked by the child
Child.
or by
Yeah, the child.
yeah. No, I mean send a letter. send something through someone. I always say, like, is there someone in your family or friends who is still connected to that child? And
Mhm.
if you can have them, send, your thoughts through them. Your mom or your dad told me that they love you very much, and they asked me to give you a hug for them, or something like that. So, reach out any way you can. Try continue to reach out.
Yeah. All right. Now, what about you've got a child who's going back and forth and they are experiencing discomfort, to say the least, with the other parent. How do you validate a child's experience with a narcissistic parent without bad mouthing them? Like, what are some tips to handle that? Because it's like you want to be like, I know, but you can't.
Yeah, it is really difficult. And you really have to be careful, because if you start saying, I know they're terrible, like they did this to me,
Yeah.
um, that's not going to be good for the child. So but you want to validate them. You don't want to say, well, your parent loves you and I'm sure they didn't mean it. You don't want to say that. So you want to validate you really want to teach them what's okay and what's not okay.
Mhm.
And so you want to help them be able to set boundaries. So if their other parent said, you can't stay in your room any of the time, you have to be down here, 100% of the time you're at my house. Um, you can say, you know, how does that feel,
Mhm.
to you? Does that feel comfortable? Does that feel fair? And talk it through with them. And you would want to say, well, it would be understandable that they would want you down with them some of the time. That's reasonable. So maybe you could say to them, I will come down for this amount of time, but I want to be able to go up to my room. So help them think through these things and understand that, some of the things that they're being asked of or talked about are not okay, and do it from a very unemotional place.
Hard.
Yeah, really hard.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying it's really about validating their feelings. It's not about fixing it for them, because I think, and you probably agree, is that our goal as parents is there's only so much that we can control, not just with their other parent, but in the world that they're going to be venturing out into. So it's really about teaching them ways to self-advocate.
Yeah, and if you get involved, you'll mess it all up, because then the other parent will think it's you and it's not the
Mhm.
kid. And so then it'll be between the two parents, and that's not what you want. So it has to be from the child.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the term parallel parenting versus co-parenting?
I mean, you can't co-parent with someone who won't co-parent with you, right?
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
can co-parent if you both are reasonable and collaborative and can work together. But if you can't, then you have to parallel parent. You have to do um, the parenting that you're going to do. But I would still do the right thing by being communicative with the other parent and let them know what you would let them know if you were co-parenting. And if they're not doing that back, you've done your job, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, yeah. So, what about speaking of communication, like because you do a lot with co-parenting communication as well. Uh, our people get very, very triggered by any kind of communication. We say, let's do it only in writing. We teach strategic communication. But are there some communication tips that you might have in terms of dealing with that PTSD? Like every time you hear the ding, like, oh no, what fresh hell is this?
Yeah, no. So I would try not to have that notify you when you're not ready to get the notification. So if you can control when you're being notified, so you can also have other people look at it. If you are you have a friend or a professional, who can look at whatever the email, the text is before you look at it. Also, parenting apps are amazing at doing this now. They can really reword what was said so that it is not triggering. They can also not allow certain things. So parenting, I mean, parenting apps have come really far in terms of that. And so I would definitely get something so that you're not seeing a text in the middle of your workday or when you're with your children. And make sure you give yourself time at the end of the day or whenever it is, so that you can look at it and process it and not get triggered and respond right away. And certainly don't respond right away when you're triggered. Make sure that you have some calming techniques so that you can get yourself to a better place before you respond.
Are there any common mistakes that you see parents make in the communication back and forth?
Oh yeah, all the time. And it's funny because they will use ChatGPT and be, very thoughtful and write it out and give me like an email that they think is great. And I'm like, no, you can't use this. Because
Same.
like
Same with my
you're not
sister.
objective, you can't take yourself out of it. Usually, most people can't take yourself out of it completely. You still are going to have a tone, or you're going to say something that just doesn't sound objective and friendly. You have
Mhm.
to have a friendly tone. So definitely have someone look it over, at least in the beginning, before you get the hang of it, of how to write those emails.
Yeah. So, and now I'm thinking about just some tips for someone like both of us have been through this and we're on the other side now. And like I said earlier, one of my biggest fears was how are my kids going to be okay? So, what would you say to parents who are still deeply in the muck, terrified that their kids are going to be ruined by this conflict and or their other parent because of how their other parent is? Like, any ideas for people to feel like it's going to be okay?
Yeah,
And here's how
no,
to
I
make it
couldn't
okay.
sleep, I couldn't eat, and it was all because of what we were doing to my kids.
Mhm.
I waited to do it for way too long. Like there are things that I totally relate to everybody who's in that muck because I was in it and it was horrible because you do all your life you're protecting your children, and now all of a sudden you're doing something that is hurting them. Like
Mhm.
they are impacted. One thing I will say is that kids see and feel everything that's going on, and being in a house, in a home with parents who are not um, healthy, don't have a healthy relationship, or don't have good communication, are hurting each other, does so bad for
Mhm.
children. And being in a situation where both parents are separate and are happier and are high functioning and are doing things in a healthy, productive way is so much better. I just had a conversation Thanksgiving with my middle child who said, I really see what a good relationship is from me and my current husband. And
Mhm.
that is so different than what was going on when they were growing up. So um, that's what you have to think about. You are a role model. Your children see everything. And I can tell you from my experience as a child, my parents should have gotten divorced. They were
Mhm.
horrible. Like they hated each other. It was terrible. They never got divorced. And that's probably one of the reasons why I made the decisions I made and I ended up in a marriage that wasn't healthy. So, um, you know, you think that this is hurting them, but it really is helping them, and it's teaching them what's healthy and what's not healthy. And so keep that in mind while you're going through this, while you see that they're suffering. Kids are so resilient. So give them time. They will get there, especially if you can keep the conflict as low as possible.
Yeah, I really related so much to what you said, especially because I also have my current partner who's Chris, who's the male half have been there, got out, and we've been together more than 10 and a half years. And I think about how my kids now, for my daughter, for more than half her life, has had that healthy relationship model. And also knowing that I'm okay, they have never, hopefully, felt responsible for my emotional health. They know
Right.
that I'm fine. And I think sometimes kids who see a parent suffering, they become more of like an adult, which is not healthy, with trying to take care of you when that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Even if you don't request that of them, even if you don't want them to take care of you, they do feel responsible when you're struggling,
Hmm.
So that's why it's really important that we get help when we're going through that so that they don't feel responsible. You're right.
Yeah. So speaking of that, Jill, how can people find you? I know you got this amazing community that I got to meet.
Yes, I have a big Facebook community for people going through separation and divorce. It's called Separation and Divorce Support Community. I have um, I have a group coaching program. You can get me at divorcecoachjill.com, info at divorcecoachjill.com. And I have a book, an online course, and there's plenty ways to work with me, no matter what your situation is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's great to see you. And I know we're going to be seeing each other, on a regular basis, I'm sure.
Yes. No, it's great that you're out there and you're doing this great work too.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
happy holidays and we will talk soon. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.